Excuse me. G'day lovers of justice. I bet you all wanted to see a popular video today. Well, you've just got one. Fiduciary duty is an obligation that politicians have to act fairly and impartially and without bias or judgment when they sign an oath before God to work in the Parliament and public office. And I'm going to call out some people in breach of their fiduciary obligations to me. I'm a disabled, unprotected whistleblower in this country, and gay disabled whistleblower, and I'm unprotected under the Public Interest Disclosure Act, and that is in itself an egregious human rights violation and a betrayal of the very justice and democracy that this country is founded on. Currently, I'm a disabled person with no home, kind of in breach of the NDIS's policies, don't you think, to be homeless? I have no possessions, they took them. I have no human rights. They've been documented as obliterated by a conspiracy that was never investigated by the NDIS, or the Australian Human Rights Commission, also overseen by Mark Dreyfus. Hey Mark, how you going? Do you remember me, buddy, when we had a bit of a talk at the marriage equality rally, just after I'd broken up with Steve Isonides, my exploitative partner of 5 years, which no politician, public official, lawyer, my family and friends, or even the media, or anyone will even acknowledge ever existed? The irony is, the government mandates me to be force injected and chemically restrained to damage my mind as a reprisal for being a whistleblower, and they accuse me of being delusional when it's the government who prefer a reality and a narrative which isn't consistent with facts and what actually happened. There's so much to say. I think some people had better be sending me some apologies, because I stand in my power. I don't give permission for anyone to abuse me, for anyone to neglect me, for anyone to redact my prosperity, to obstruct my legal aid, to demonize me, to vilify me for madness, whether it exists or whether it not. If you have a false accusation against me, like the V2K tells me, if you got evidence I'm a pedophile, then let's see it in court. If there's evidence I'm a rapist, let's test it in court. Debbie Morgan, I've been told, now that the assassination attempt is out of the way, was bribed by someone to fabricate a report about consensual sex that we had when I lost my virginity. And that fact alone underpinned the whole narrative of Recovered Not Cured, the autobiography, the Human Rights Award winning autobiography, Sane's Book of the Year, Human Rights Award, and this has been a deliberate and an intelligently designed deceit that all of my family and friends have been in on, that all people have been in on, and it is a gay hate crime, because it didn't matter that I turned out to be gay after I had sex with Debbie Morgan. Hi Debbie, how you going? Hope you're well. It really doesn't. I could have been pink and purple polka dots, or I could have been a unicorn with a big 14-inch black cock and a pink unicorn, and it still would have been consensual sex. So that thing alone, which I have the evidence for now, has underpinned my entire reality in my entire life of a false accusation, and it's by design to try and impinge and enforce on me the element of shame. But the shame is not mine to own. The shame is with a very heteronormative police force who, let's face it, aren't the biggest gay advocates in the world, and it's been the longest, most egregious and damaging gay hate crime that Australia has ever seen. I've never been able to report a crime to police, and the police are quite happy to follow Bill Shorten's lead and identify, locate and interrogate and criminalise me as a criminal, and then coordinate an attack with Zabi from Free Living Australia, and Graham Wells from Legal Aid, and the Magistrates Court, and they all hatched a plan in order to intimidate me, knowing I couldn't get help from anywhere because I was obstructed by design, and intimidate me with jail. And for that, the police orchestration, the hypocrisy, the pure hypocrisy of Victoria Police and of New South Wales Police and of Federal Police has targeted me unfairly. It's acted in breach of its obligations when it comes to serving the community, of their fiduciary obligations to me as a disabled person and as a free citizen of the democracy. And it has been an egregious human rights abuse that's underpinned my destruction over my life. And I've remained consistent my whole time, and I've spoken my truth, and I've spoken from the heart. And if anyone has any criticism about me, it's that you can't not say that I call out bullshit and I speak the truth, because no one likes their bullshit being called out on, and no one wants a disabled gay whistleblower to shirt front them or show them up, make them feel like they're inferior to my bravery and my courage. That fact alone, that psychological dynamic, really underpins just a single thread of my targeting over 30 years since my book, Recovered Not Cured, A Journey Through Schizophrenia, came out, and the Herald Sun, the old right-wing Nazi paper where I used to work, vilified me for madness and called the big article My Descent into Madness, How Schizophrenia Stole Richard McLean's Mind. And then weeks later, the good old people at The Age, hi Jamie Brown, how you going, you cocksucker, fired me illegally, knowing full well that I couldn't get work cover, that I couldn't go to WorkSafe or get a lawyer to oppose them, just literally without reason, in great coincidence with this book coming out. I'm sorry, there's no more shifts for you. You owe me an apology, and you owe me money, and I'm going to get it. So that's just another underpinning of this whole thing. The shame, discrimination, stigma, and prejudice that mental illness brings people. And to my bravery and my moral aptitude and my moral authority and high ground over all of you cunts, I campaigned for 30 years advocating for marginalised people and their carers, and I became quite successful and known. I've spoken in Australian Parliament. I've spoken on ABC News, Triple J, Stateline, Dateline, SBS, Triple R. I've appeared in person on local, state, federal and international audiences, backed up by an extensive art career of 35 years of existing as an independent artist, a very successful one with a bit of talent that I might say. People are pretty jealous of that. And I've been a great runaway success. People might think I'm not a success. People are plugged in to this reality that money brings you success. It doesn't. I don't even want money, but I will get it just to prove a point. Because I'm authentic, I'm real, I call the shots and I call it where I see it. I know what's happened to me, and everyone, including Mother Dearest, tries to vilify me with madness. I need to take my medication. I need to see a psychiatrist. You could do more for yourself, you know. I mean, you do take drugs. And we don't like the fact that you're very sexually adventurous and seem to enjoy your sexuality when we're all conditioned and we're plugged into the reality of not being able to critique the things. And we feel repressed as compared to Rich, who's now changed his name to Baron Dodger. In part a humorous thing because I'm dodging the Baron in my life, such as the sustained financial reductions of the manipulation of the legal system and politics and society and companies and work cover and work safe and insurances and a brain settlement for my brain injury and for the illegal carcerations. There is so much going on here, and it gets better that this is probably the most egregious human rights violation that is documented by someone no less who has a doctor of philosophy and a specialisation in AI, the Anthropocene, the end of the human era, and post-humanism. I'm not an idiot, and I know how to put things together to prove a narrative. This is why. First we'll go back a step. So, I've never got justice. My former partner, Steve Isonides, is an ASIO agent. Every public official, lawyer, politician, all of them expect a marriage settlement if their marriage broke up. They expect work cover if they got injured at work. But all of those people collectively deny me the same privilege whilst sustaining their professional roles. And this is not only hypocrisy, it's corruption and it's targeting me. I am a targeted individual of the Australian government. That means that I don't get justice. That means I don't get prosperity. The things that I could have or possess, which would improve my life or make me happy, are taken away from me. And likewise, things that would cause me harm or cause me distress, they're added to my experience. I don't have a home, food, medicine. After 10 hospitalizations in 3 years, I still don't have a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a drug and alcohol counsellor, any legal help, any financial help. I've been obliterated and erased from this society that we call Australia, and who, for the most part, most people enjoy, so long as you don't stick your nose out of place, speak the truth, and critique the authorities. Because in Australia, we like to chop down the tall poppy. And any ruling party, no matter what it is, should be mature enough and wise enough to accept criticism of itself, because by acknowledging the criticism, it burnishes its power and authority to be more effective and has greater power. I whistle blew to save my life. That didn't happen, I died. I'll get that in a minute. And I also did it for the purposes of democracy and humanity everywhere. I did it for all people of Australia and around the world because I have a divine sense of justice and a divine sense of fairness and a moral aptitude that is highly evolved. And when I see corruption, I can't help but say something about it. I don't have a good filter. Often people will say, I overshare too much, or we don't need to know that. And people always have the same answer. That's not within our remit. I don't know a lawyer. That's not what we do here. I don't have any money. Same old thing. And every single person, organisation, agency, politician, everyone sidesteps the issue and handballs it to the next guy. Well, guess what? I'm owed a few apologies and a bit of compensation. Firstly, the government needs to acknowledge my former relationship with Steve Icenides, a multi-millionaire who exploited me and my disability over 5 years. And it's a really remarkable thing, he's convinced an entire country and society to never acknowledge that relationship even existed. Now that's the talents of a master manipulator and a sociopathic narcissist. He would love that I tried to kill myself. He was the reason why I ended up in the hospital. And while I was in the hospital, I attempted suicide after years of targeting and persecution. And it was a fatal injury, and I was revived from certain death. Now, I'd been fighting numerous battles on my own, much less mental illness and just coping with life and finding work and sexuality and everything else, that I was fighting my own child sexualization abuse. And again, it was obstructed, it was closed down all the way through. And the magistrate at Geelong said I was doomed to fail. And I thought, well, that's rather colourful language for a sexual abuse survivor. And on the day that I killed myself in hospital, my sexual abuser dropped dead. I didn't have any animosity. I don't like to harbour hate within me. I just said, bless you, go to the light. My family, on the other hand, were just as forgiving for the disastrous thing that he did to me. In that whilst I was being filled up with blood after bleeding out on the psychiatric floor and dying, hemorrhaging my blood for about a good 45 minutes before I collapsed unconscious and died, and I was being filled up with blood, and my whole family went to see him off at his funeral. And that was a really dreadful and heartbreaking thing for me to even comprehend why they would do that. So Steve Icenides, that's got to be acknowledged. Thank you very much. That's $500,000 at least from Super. He's also threatened to kill my dog and me because I've exposed his corruption, and he got done for $1 million embezzlement. So I'd like some cred for that, please. And I want to put an AVO on him that he can't touch me or send anyone else that can. So there's that. Now, I'm going to just go through the agencies and shit that they owe me and the apologies. There's Tim Goss at AFCA, who blindsided me and gaslit me for years, knowing I'd killed myself and I was desperate for money and compensation. And he elongated, delayed, denied, deferred the process. So drove me quite mad. And he drove me into poverty. And he did it deliberately. And he's a person of privilege who has, a cushy job and $500,000 a year salary, and he has all the power, all the protection, all the lawyers, all the house, the secretary, the computer, the home, the second home, the car. He's got all that. He's got civil liberties. He's got privacy, he's got power, he's got political freedom of movement, he's got clothes, he's got food, he's got medicine, he's got all of the things that were intentionally and deliberately redacted from me over years, one by one, and it happened over time. There is an end point to that detriment, and it's to disable a person's life, and it's to deconstruct their reality, and it's to confuse them, and it's to deliberately get a vulnerability, any vulnerability can find, whether it's true or not, and amplify that with intention by manipulation of politics, institutions, and society. And that is an egregious, satanic kind of thing that human beings do to other human beings. And with me and the targeting, it's systemic, it's political, and it's personal. I chatted to Mark Dreyfus at length at the marriage equality breakup in 2013, just after I was breaking up with Steve. And he knew who Steve was. He knew of my book, Recovered Not Cured. He knew that I told him all about my advocacy and my heart, and I was doing a master's degree and I'd finished that. He knew who I was. And Mark, you are really a cowardly person. You have great privilege, all the attributes of power and privilege, and a really overinflated, audacious confidence that you can get away with targeting and using your political might to persecute me to the degree of institutional murder. And then when I was revived from certain death, to get the NDIS to force me to sleep in my car without any possessions or healthcare or support. And that all comes from you, Mark Dreyfus. And it's not just that, it's the other agencies under your control. You're a lawyer. You're very aware of how to blacklist, stonewall, and block a vulnerable person. And you were right on board with being an active participant in doing that. The Australian Human Rights Commission, Liz Linsberg, it is recorded on YouTube. She says they don't want to enter the agreement anymore or whatever, the conciliation. And by saying so, she lost me over $1 million. She said it like pass the salt. And Liz Linsberg from the Australian Human Rights Commission is one of the corrupt political elite, just like Tim Goss, and just like Scott Treadwell from the federal court, where I did another whistleblower complaint, and they acknowledged that I was an employee of DSS. You would think that's enough to pay my work cover, when Comcare came to the conclusion that I'm not an employee. And then I took it to AAT, and it was upheld by Member Pennell there, defended by government lawyer Kate Watson, who is in breach of her legal obligations of impartiality and fairness, and of decrying me as a disabled person, and knowing full well that I have rights as a disabled person under the UN Charter of Disabled People. And they all conspired in this elaborate way that gets so ridiculous and absurd in the end that obstructs my justice. There is nothing I can say, no fact that is clear enough that will get that money paid. The federal court, a federal court document, is satisfied I was employed by DSS. No work cover for you. It just gets really absurd. The DSS minister, Ray Griggs, hi Ray, you owe me an apology. You see, I whistleblower to Ray Griggs and to DSS, and they obstructed it. They denied that Steve and I's relationship ever existed, and then they denied that I was ever employed there, despite a federal court document, which is on top of them, saying that I was. And I complained to him, and he refused to get back to me. And I said to him, I owe you $125,000. I owe it to you because I was in a relationship and I claimed the pension when I shouldn't have, and I should have dobbed in the relationship. Mind you, it was via the manipulation of Icenides that forced me to accept that pension when he was earning $40,000 a month and I was earning $400 a week. It doesn't seem to add up, does it? So I said to Ray, I owe you $125,000. All you got to do is acknowledge the relationship with Steve Icenides, and he did get a carer's pension at the same time as we were together. And, you know, once you acknowledge that, it'll pave the way for a $500,000 settlement, and I'll flick you back the $125,000. And he just totally and utterly ignored me. That's a deliberate tactic of this government. But I did protest it on academia.com, and Ray Griggs, in his audacious nature of being untouchable and that he can't be critiqued and it is impervious to criticism, I uploaded the complaint that I sent to him, and he actually signed in and claimed that he was a co-author of that complaint on academia.com. So he's acknowledged that he's received it on academia.com, but I've never received an acknowledgement from the horse's mouth. Why? Because he's corrupt. It's not okay to delegitimise a very expensive compensation like that, especially when I've been the bigger person in admitting my potential fraud. But he's stonewalled me in favour of Icenides, who has enormous influence and was under David Irvine, and that David Irvine was aware of our relationship and he was complicit in Steve Icenides' exploitation of me. That's such knowledge that goes such to the top that it becomes an absurd reality. There's so much more to speak of. So, Ray Griggs, I want you to acknowledge that I worked for DSS because I've got a DSS government login, and the NDIS is positioned under DSS. So when I said to work cover, I'm employed by the NDIS, I didn't really realise that that's how the mechanics of it worked. But that is how they work, and the federal court document is satisfied that I was employed by you. So you can't stonewall me anymore. You owe me an apology, and you also owe me about $800,000. And I wrote to the NDIS and I said, I don't want the NDIS anymore because here's the document which proves I'm owed work cover, and here's a document of Steve and I's lease together, 5 years of photos, and me giving him the ring for our marriage. Clearly we're in a relationship, so if you can just acknowledge that, that'll pave the way for at least $500,000, so that's over $1 million, and I won't need the NDIS. And Bill Shorten, what a winner he is. They got back to me and said, oh, it's not our position, or we don't do that, or we can't advocate for you, or basically they were obstructing justice, and they were keeping me entrapped to the same NDIS that was actively participating in my financial abuse, and that all public officials and all people at the NDIS would expect a marriage settlement, and they'd expect work cover, and all of them denied me the same privilege. And that's hypocrisy, and that's corruption, and you all owe me an apology. But it's not just an apology. You see, as time went on, I realised I was being set up, tortured, persecuted, surveilled, gang-stalked. If you don't know what these terms are, look them up. And I was suffering V2K audio harassment, which is a sophisticated way that intelligence agencies can demonise and torture whistleblowers like me. It puts voices into your head, and it makes sounds appear on the radio, in your car, wherever you are, in your home. And I know, and I knew they weren't of God or of my origin, because they were not consistent with what I know I am. They were accusation, false accusation. You're a fucking rapist. You're a fucking pedophile. Fucking kill yourself. We fucking hate you. You know, you're a fucking slut. Kill yourself. These aren't voices from me, because I have a good relationship with God, and God lifts you up. God forgives. God gives redemption. God makes you a better person. God gives you the opportunity to come up and puts you the whole way so that you get to earn it. And then when you reach there, you get to have a sense of pride that I've achieved this thing, you know, and I deserve it, and I own it, and I know what I am, and I've really earned it, and I'm proud. That's what God does. But these voices were not of God. They were of a man-made technological invention, and they were cruel, and they were satanic, and they were inaccurate, and they were false accusations. And I was well aware for a long time that I'd been set up and I was being attacked by psychological operations. In addition to that, I was being entrapped to poverty. I was forced to exile by Bill Shorten, who weaponised the police in order to intimidate me out of town, in order to silence me as a whistleblower, as a deliberate tactic in order to isolate me. And the government had already gone through all my family and friends and provided them ample evidence that I was mad and that I was on drugs, that I've got moral decay, and you know, that it's me and it's all my fault. But it's not the fault of the agencies and the very orchestrated and intelligent structure that was doing this to me. And all the family and friends that have been convinced that it's my fault and I've got the detriment have been duped by more intelligent, more powerful, and more influential people than they realise. And that has more power to influence them than is the care that they have for me anyway. So all of the people are turned against me, and I'm entrapped to the NDIS. And after I was hospitalised up here another time as a political prisoner for the sin of being homeless and being chased out of your house. I was trapped there for a month. My phone was taken away from me, and I had help that were going to help me get a house, and the hospital and the NDIS obstructed that help. And Cal Graham, delegate to the CEO, Rebecca Falkingham, also obstructed fraud investigations, and she actively participated in removing supports from me when she knew that current arrangements had been torn up. So that's the corruption, at least, there, that I can prove. Cal Graham, you owe me an apology. And so what happened then was they tortured me for a long time. They wouldn't leave me go from the hospital until I signed a contract that I was coerced to sign, which makes it an illegal contract anyway. And I was trapped in this house with no car, with barely money, begging for food and medicine every day, and that the government then stepped in to force inject me as a political means of shirt fronting me and betraying me, and of demonising me, and of chemically castrating my brain as a chemical restraint in order to damage the brain that was critiquing them. And it was a deliberate way to piss me off. And it used to drive me furious because I didn't need that medication, and I didn't want that medication. And the hospital was all in on it, all the doctors and all the nurses. The doctors and the nurses are in with the cops, and they're in with the lawyers, and they're in with the NDIS. They're all in cahoots with one another. And they would harass me. They're paid now. It becomes a bureaucracy. It's a systemic thing. The person who's responsible for injecting me with the drugs, I've never even met. And when I refuse, the cops surround the house, 10 of them, bang the door in, intimidate me, and sit there and watch as they commit assault and battery on me, and just gawk at the process as if we're watching some mad monkey get the medication he needs. They're aware or can't or won't realise they, the police, are active participants in battery and abuse. It would make me wild. Anyway, police, hospitals, you owe me an apology. It came to the point where I didn't die, and that was the point, over this 30-year period, to deconstruct his life and cause him to die. I'd already died once, and we know no one cares because not a tear was shed. And I was forced to leave my car with my possessions gone under the NDIS. That's not consistent with NDIS policy, I'm afraid. And so when I didn't die, and they do it, they mean for you to die, but they want to make you do it. They want to make it so neglectful, so torturous, so poverty-stricken, and with the added things of the torture and the gang stalking and the V2K and the poverty and the begging, they entrap you to something and then make you beg for it. It's corrupt. And when I didn't die, and I was a whistleblower, a few things happened. I fucked Tony Riddle, a senior fraud investigator for the NDIS. He came into my house, we got really fucking high, and we fucked, but he was an interesting person, and he was so interesting as a returned SAS soldier and survivor of the Black Hawk helicopter crash, and he also had some very interesting allegations to make about the NDIS and about $6 billion in corruption that the NDIS minister knew about. Have a look in the media. You'll see that Bill Shorten's tried to acknowledge that and smooth it over. He was pissed off. I whistleblew and I published the recording of Riddle, who I thought might harm me because he said he'd killed people or something to that degree. So Bill Shorten now has incredibly orchestrated with the Australian government a hit on my life. That's an Australian Western democracy treating a scapegoat as a human sacrifice in order to preserve the status quo and preserve the corruption and the rich, corrupt, powerful elite. It was a murder plot. They had enlisted criminal gangs who were Lebanese, and they sent them up from Melbourne to intercept me. And because I run a whistleblowing website, I got some pretty interesting messages saying, he's well known in certain circles, I can't say anything, just run. Get out of there, run. He's sent to extinguish you. A little bit of fossicking around and some record keeping, which I do pretty well. And I found out that the NDIS company he works for isn't a company at all. It's deregistered at ASIC, and it is evident that he is there to locate and assassinate me. And I had to leave. I had to leave at the same time that NCAT ruled that I am kicked out anyway. So the government, not satisfied with all this stuff, was now actively participating in kicking me out of the only accommodation I had, which was just the shell of a torture chamber where voices were put into my head, and I was kept in poverty by Bill Shorten, hoping to kill me. And then when I didn't, they excommunicated me and sent an actual hit, a murder. That's a Western democracy murdering a disabled gay whistleblower. It's an egregious human rights abuse, and it is the most senior and prominent and significant human rights abuse of a Western country in this country, probably in living memory. And it's the most high-level corruption case that this government has ever been embroiled in. And I wonder why I'm followed, and I wonder why I'm gang stalked, and I wonder why my prosperity is redacted, and I wonder why my legal aid's obstructed. Do the math, people. Australia is a country and a democracy most people enjoy because they don't stick their neck out. But for a true speaker like me and a true seeker like me, they have demonised, targetised and ordered an assassination attempt. I kid you not. The only reason it was stopped by ASIO and the authorities was because of my record keeping and the fact that I called it out. And the government couldn't afford to have itself known as a democracy that has ordered the hit and human sacrifice of a disabled gay whistleblower who is under the care of the very NDIS minister who ordered the hit. It's so profoundly disturbing that the government could do this to me. It's wrong. It's murder. And I'd already died once and was revived. This treatment of me is going to The Hague. I won't stand for this. I actually asked all politicians to be removed from the Australian democracy and to actually be put somewhere where I would be able to survive, because as it stands in this society, I don't have the attributes and the necessary things to live a life of meaning, to contribute back to society, or even the ability to exist in a democracy with which you need money to participate. And I didn't have any money. It was taken from me as a means and an allegorical way of removing you from society. Erasure of erasing you from society. And when the first murder didn't work and I was revived, and then they tried to keep me in poverty and murder me again and make me do it, but then they couldn't do it still, so they ordered a hit, and then I called it out, so they had to stop the hit. But then after the hit was exposed and the NDIS provider, I begged to do something about it, and he didn't believe me, and then he got back to me and said I had to sign a confidentiality agreement, and you were right, they ordered a hit on you, and Bill Shorten's in fucking big trouble, and all this other stuff. Debbie Morgan fabricated a report that she was paid to fabricate an allegation against me, that the hit was an actual reality, and 2 offenders were caught. 2 assassins were caught. They weaponized all of the cameras in the area through AI, and they detected all the number plates, and they found out people were there, and I narrowly missed being executed by the Australian government. I plan to take this to The Hague. This isn't just an isolated example of one person's suffering, because when one person suffers like this, the whole of the democracy suffers. If it was me, it could have been you. And that's why I'm sticking up for me, and I'm sticking up for all of you, but it's all of you, a society that has betrayed me. So that's my little rant today. The Australian government has orchestrated a murder and then covered it up with impunity, and then didn't even give me the dignified explanation of what is going on. There was just a further weaponization of my sexuality, of false allegations, of targeting, of gang stalking, of intimidation, of threats, of murder that I had to keep running. In the past month, I've been from Sydney to out west, to back to Sydney, to up to Port Macquarie, and then to Coffs Harbour, and then to Newcastle, and I'm running the whole time, unable to report the very crime to police. The people are after me and trying to kill me, and they're following me from bit to bit, and I'm being gang stalked and harassed the whole time, with people intercepting me with little comments like, "You raped Deb," or "We know," or "You're a pedophile." And everywhere I go, people are just doing this, and it must be a really costly exercise to be able to do this and then fake it or try and convince me that I'm going mad. I know I'm not mad. I've been raised actually hearing voices. I know which ones are not real and which ones aren't. They like to try and double down on the illness thing. It's like, there's 2 possibilities. If you're mad and you don't matter, or you're not mad and you don't. Once you're mad or identified as mad, there's no way out of it, because people vilify you either way. So it was especially cruel for the Australian government to get my history in my brave book and then weaponize it and surveil me and study me and find out all the little bits and pieces that they could potentially exploit in order to damage me, deconstruct my life, and kill me as a targeted individual, which is a mandate up at the Attorney General and the Prime Minister and ASIO and Steve Ioannidis and all those big knobs and the Five Eyes Alliance, because as it stands, I'm now a threat to this democracy. The democracy doesn't want you to know that it's murdering its own civilians, especially when they're disabled and under their care. So now I'm a terrorist threat. I've done nothing but speak the truth. I'm a lover, not a fighter. I like to have sex. It's the only real thing that I've got left to enjoy. Everything else has been taken from me. They've deconstructed every single thing necessary for me to exist in society, and I've begged them, move me somewhere else. Export me. Take me to another country. I will not survive here. Right now, I've got that. There's 2 noodles, a little bit of Coke. Poor Crystal, my therapy dog, hasn't got any food. I've got a can of tuna, and I keep being set up by people to intercept me and all the apps and to deceive me. And this is one of the great things about my whole experience, is the utter deception of everyone that I know. And if I'm going to exist on this planet, I'm going to have to forgive everyone involved, because I need the other people. But the people have deceived me, because they're less than perfect, and they're mortal, imperfect beings, less than what divinity is. And I feel like there's a Christ consciousness in me, and I feel like if it's not in me, then I aspire to be like it, with my justice and my speaking and my love for humanity, because without that I wouldn't be here. And I just think that everyone's important. And I think that everyone deserves a go. And I think that even if you've done something wrong, or heinous fucking thing, you're given the opportunity to redeem, to better yourself, to admit faults, to improve. That's what divine grace does. It builds people up, and it forgives them, makes them learn their mistakes, to admit them and go on to the next bit and be a better person. God and spirituality and the Christ consciousness ups people. But this government and how it's treated me, it's always been on the attack to demean, demolish, deconstruct, and to desecrate my spirituality. And I'll tell you this, the angels that support me being on the earth, and I was sent here and I want to be here, are much more supreme than the corruption, the lies, and the conspiracy and the deceit which has targeted me from every single politician, every single lawyer, every single politician, lawyer, and all my family and friends in the media. It's much stronger than that. And you know what? I'm going to win. Because you know why? I don't have an allegiance to the government that murdered me and then covered it up and then tried to kill me again and then ordered the hit and then covered it up and forced me to more persecution again. I have an allegiance with God, and God is on my side. That is why I will win, and that is why I will win at the International Criminal Court at The Hague, and why the world will know this country's sin and why they will be held accountable. And even if it does kill me, it's all in the public domain, and I'm venerated as a freedom fighter and a truth speaker and seeker forevermore. So a few people owe me an apology, and I'll be expecting to hear from them. I love people, I understand them, and I understand why they're deceitful and corrupt as well. It's because they're fearful. They're fearful of losing their power. They're easily influenced with bribes, with money. They're only human. And I'm a mortal earth monkey as well. So let's go easy on each other, but let's make a quest for some accountability and to put a bit of love back into the ruling powers that be, because these man-made structures are not going to last with the energy change that's coming and the grand spirituality and the 1,000 years of peace which is on our doorstep, and I'm a pivotal person in bringing that about.